It should be going there. Takes a second to spool up. How has your week been so far, Katie?
Long,
Yeah.
long. Yeah. Just working a lot, which is just sucking up most of my time, trying to figure out where my next vacation's gonna be.
uh, and the next vacation probably isn't coming soon enough, is it?
No, I fly home in August, but that's not really a vacation.
Oh, back to Pennsylvania. What you got going on there?
Nothing much. Just gonna go see my mom and them and my dad and my sister and my other relatives. Um,
Okay.
I like to go as much as I can because when my husband and I were first married, we were broke. And now that we have a little bit extra income, I go home a little bit more regular, like every 6 months or more. So it's been nice.
Okay. No,
Yeah.
that's good. That is good. Yeah, I think it's important to. I don't know why this isn't capturing the video right now. No, that's good to get there, visit family, humana, all that stuff.
Right.
All right, I'm gonna try reloading this into here. Here, boom. Yeah, it's oh. Yeah, we're for some
Shall I
reason
fire
our
off your?
feed.
Should I fire off
What's
your
that?
intro for you? Should I fire off your intro for you?
Yeah, go ahead and fire it off as we're
All right,
struggling
here we
through
go.
this. Fired off.
Live from Utah's Wasatch Front, the pulse of the Mountain West, where the issues that shape your life meet the truth that sets you free. Across Utah, across the Republic, and around the world, welcome. This is KMMU.
Well, that is yeah, that's kind of I guess what we expected to happen there. Oh, all right. Well, anyways, so it's not coming across on the Facebook right now, so we may have to go without that. That's okay. So, Katie, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I am living the dream currently.
Yeah, I see you're getting already festive for the 4th of July. It looks like from that shirt.
Oh yeah. Yeah. This is my fun time shirt.
I can appreciate that. They were talking this week that at work that Monday is Canada Day, which is like their version of like 4th of July. And so we were talking about that. I think I'm gonna wear a bunch of 4th of July stuff, like patriotic stuff all week next week just to drive people insane.
Do you have a lot of Canada people there with you?
Yeah, we're based in Canada. I'm the minority as an American.
Oh, really?
As I remind them. Yeah. So yeah, I work for a Canadian company. I love it. It's great.
A lot of a-hosers and
A lot of hockey talk.
yeah.
I'm very fortunate. I was a hockey fan before I joined the company and knew quite a bit about it. So it kind of, I was able to ease in and be able to talk about things. Because I think when you start at new places, especially foreign places, because I haven't worked for an American company in over 10 years. And so it just makes things very interesting when you know a little bit about the culture. The
Huh.
Danish were the best, though, because they were just into drinking.
That's all they do, huh?
Oh, they have this one day a year where the Christmas beer comes out, and like they like shut down the office like once noon hits, because it's like the Christmas beer is here. Everyone has to go drink now, and it's just so wild.
That's, you know what? That's I like that. I have to say I like that. They shut it down for the community festivities.
Right. And the idea too is like this company's like it's the flavor for the holiday season, you know, it's very like traditional festive, and I do appreciate that a lot. It just seemed like there was a lot of days that we weren't working because we were drinking, so you know, that's fine.
I wish we had a little more of that here. You know, I mean, I understand that maybe overall economically it might damage us, you know, slowing down the engine, but I think we could probably, especially after the last couple of weeks we've had, use a little bit of community building, if you will, like a whole community, not the 3 communities we kind of have going right now, but the everyone together, like something that everyone can celebrate.
Yeah, I agree. That's kind of my hopes with like maybe the 4th. I don't know like any more like what like just simple carefree things that bring people together. Like in Denmark it's beer, Canada it's hockey. Like what brings Americans together right now just feels like a big disconnect.
You're right. You're right. And okay, so I may as well get into it right now. It feels like, and correct me if I'm wrong, the Democrat Party dislikes patriotism over, say, the last 15 to 20 years. And so can we reverse that to have that as a community builder?
It's very interesting you say that, because at my last meeting that I conducted as chair of the Utah County Dems, I made everyone say the pledge. And that was
The Pledge of
like,
Allegiance?
yes. And even though like I was talking about it, and like I told them, because I think sometimes we've been led to believe that like this like patriotism stuff is linked to something else that's nefarious. And it's like, listen, like we can take this back. And that's kind of how I like when I would talk about my own people about it, is like, you can do the pledge. Like you can take these things back and say like, this is a part of my patriotic identity. Right. Am I for doing the pledge every morning in a school? No, I think that's a bit excessive, but you know, it's like those things in those places where you should do it and you should take those moments. And I think in those types of places it's really appropriate. But I don't know where this idea of like patriotism got away from the party, because that's definitely a cultural thing. I think right now that's ongoing.
I think it was a few years into the Iraq War, if I was to guess.
Oh, that's a good. Well, and it's so crazy because you think about like 9/11, right? And you think of like Toby Keith, who humorously, he had some of the best American propaganda of all time, of like, you know, the American Red, White, and Blue song, you know what I mean? And that really brought, like, that song really brought Americans together to the point of like enlisting. And it's like, but I think people got exhausted of the war and the ongoings of that patriotism died a little from it.
I think you're right. Well, let's face it, that war kind of was surrounded by a little bit of shadiness.
And it was so draining. It wasn't
Mhm.
like, it just felt like there was no end in sight at times. And I would imagine it was similar. You think of like the Vietnam War, I imagine that was a similar vibe around that as well, you know?
Yeah. Well, when they, I believe Colin Powell was lied to when he got up there and held up the vial of anthrax, right?
Yeah.
I believe he's an honest man. I choose to believe that. I don't know him, but that's what I'm going to choose to believe.
Yeah.
He was an outstanding soldier, all those things. But when he got up there and lied and we entered Iraq, I think that's when a lot of people looked at it like, wait a second, what is this? And then you had General Wesley Clark come out in that talk in, I want to say it was like 2008, 2007. And he came out and said he come across, he was in the Pentagon and one of his old subordinates called him over and said, hey, sir, come here and look at this. You know, they're saying we're going to invade all these countries. And he's like, what?
Right.
So I wonder if those situations didn't take hold with the Republicans, obviously, because it was their party that was in power. Granted, parties didn't seem to carry the same weight at that time.
No.
Because I don't think we were in the culture was different. There's different times that parties have carried more weight and carried more, you know, whatever. But I think that was one of those times where it carried weight, but not the same way it does now, or probably the same way it did in the late 70s.
That's what I was just thinking of, like late 70s, like especially around times with unions and other thing. Yeah. And like, I think some of it too, potentially with the Republican Party, you could say their people were much more in line to get in to the idea of like going to war, where I think there was more Democrats who were apprehensive about the war. Because like I remember growing up, my dad was one of the few people that I like knew real time who was like, we shouldn't be going to this war. He was like, the things aren't adding up, was kind of his thoughts. He was like, I just wish we would think about this a little bit.
Are you talking about the Afghan or the Iraq?
The first one. So what was that?
The Afghan. So yeah. The total thing.
Yeah. Because he said after 9/11, he was just like, I think we should like slow things down, think about it, you know, because my dad didn't believe there was weapons of mass destruction. Like that was his big thing. And I remember at the time growing up, like if you told people that your dad thought like that, it was like, well, where's his tinfoil hat? You know, he must be an absolute loon. And my dad is a loon in some aspects. The man is obsessed with Sasquatch and aliens, but
your dad sounds like a genius. What are you talking about?
I mean, he's something, that's for sure. He's a lot of fun. But like, I just remember people like, I remember being like, oh, people would be like ostracizing us if anyone knew how he thought, you know?
Yeah. I'm trying to remember. There were, let me see if I can look it up. I used to remember the name. There was one senator who voted no on Afghanistan, and he got drummed out.
Yep, he got booted. I don't remember who it was, and that tells you kind of like what happened to him.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I know Dr. Ron Paul, I I think he voted yes, but I think he talked about how he regretted that after. And then I think he voted no on the invasion of Iraq in 2003.
Yeah.
I know Hillary Clinton was real big on kind of whipping the vote out of the Democrats.
Yeah, she was really good at doing that. So is Nancy Pelosi.
Well, yes, but it's wild. Hillary Clinton was pushed to the forefront as a junior senator of New York for that. And that was a wild time. Such the political capital that family carried at that time was wild. And
Well,
I don't know.
She went from White House to the New York Senate, and like it's hard to run in New York. Like we're seeing that right now with the election of just like the mayor stuff that's going on.
What's his name?
Mondami.
Yeah, Zohan Mondami or something. Zonam.
I was really loving when he told Zoran Mamdani.
Yeah, Zoran.
Yeah, because I was loving, like, I have to be careful what I say about this topic, but I will say that what I really appreciated with him was the problem with Andrew Cuomo is he is the system. He is the swamp. You know what I mean? Of the Democratic Party. And I think a lot of young people have a very hard time connecting with him because of that. And so this was a very interesting win to see that, like, the establishment isn't always on first, which is that was the most interesting thing about this.
Yes, that there is. Okay. This is one of the subjects I wanted to cover lightly with you, but I'm glad you entered into it because I am of lots of minds on this. But first, let's call out Jordan Lott. He says, "Hey, everyone, all the presidents are war criminals. The American working people should be defending the working people of Iran. As a libertarian, I'm against wars." Well, I can't make a call on what is going on in Iran. I don't know what to think about any of this right now. And then he talks about good stuff. The aliens are probably having a secret meeting at Area 51 right now. And the Fed, baby, the establishment is corrupt and evil. Maybe the aliens are who's in charge. All the lizard people are just aliens. But yeah, so the Iran thing, the bombing of Iran, it came out of the blue and then it disappeared out of the blue. Everyone who came out against it kind of ended up, they kind of ended up with a little egg on their face. But then again, you could tell a lot of Trump's cabinet had to swallow their pride to go out and stump for it. That's why I don't know what to think about it. I don't know.
I'm not loving any of, like, so when they bombed Iran, it was just kind of like, because, my best friend, he's a libertarian and he's in the Air Force, and he was in Qatar last week. You know what I mean? And they pulled them out before Iran bombed the Qatar.
And it's wild. Iran called them up and said, "Hey, we're bombing Qatar in 6 hours." So
right.
What does that tell me about Iran?
Right.
Does that tell me that Iran is the evil empire? I don't know. I don't know any of this stuff.
This all just feels showy, like showmanship kind of stuff. And it's like, well, like we bombed them, because that's all the news was we were bombed. You know what I mean? The Qatar base was bombed. And like what really made me frustrated with the news reporting was my best friend was just there. And he was like, no one got hurt. He's like, we shot them all down. You know what I mean? And so it's like they were all intercepted. And it's like, okay, but is, like, we were warned, like they were intercepted. Like, how bad is this really? You know what I mean? It just feels showmanship.
It kind of makes you wonder if all the leaders of all the countries are in on this at once.
I
If it came out, I would not fall over surprised
no.
that they're not all on a red phone together saying, okay, here's what we're going to do. Iran's like, look, I got a lot of protests. I need people to jump onto my side. So you do this and we'll kind of become a martyr. And then, of course, Netanyahu's like, hey, look, if I get drummed out of here, I'm going to trial immediately because they were fitting to take me to trial before October 7th. Okay, done. And Trump says, I want the news to like me for a minute. And then boom. So there it is.
Right.
I don't know. And Putin's off in the background doing whatever Putin does. And I don't know. But anyway, so.
And like, it's just so wild though to just watch it because it just feels like a ballet. And like, I feel like a lot of people just get sucked into it. And it's just like, this is crazy.
It is. It is. And I don't know what's going on. Or maybe it's all really just what it is on the face. And Occam's razor would say everyone's just trying to maneuver as they can.
Right.
So I don't know. But I like conspiracy theories, Bigfoots, and aliens. So I'll lean into those. That's what I'll dream about. But anyway, so you brought up Mondani.
Yeah.
He was a rapper at one time,
He was. I saw videos of it. I had never but once again, he's like 33. You know, he's around
young.
my age. It's
he's
like
naive.
Right. Like I like completely because I think what's so hard about being the millennial generation and younger is just like your whole life is on the internet.
Yes.
And it's like, my mom talks about like sometime when we were getting ready to go to college and she would get really upset because at that time we were being told that like universities would look at your Facebook page to see like what type of person were you. Yeah. And it's like, how do you explain to a 17, 18-year-old who's getting ready to go to college, like, hey, there's an adult world out there and you can be judged on very innocent things like red Solo cups and photos.
Yep.
And like that was a really hard lesson, but I don't know. I didn't mind him rapping, but
that doesn't bother me at all. I mean, we've had, right now we've got a person who made a lot of their bones by doing what do you call it? Reality show. We've had multiple actors. We've had war heroes. Remember JFK?
Ronald Reagan started out as a movie star.
Ronald Reagan was an actor.
Right.
JFK was a pretty much a legitimate war hero.
Yeah.
Boat getting sunk, rescuing MacArthur. There was a lot of things he did too. So I think there's room for all of that in our political leadership. One thing I think that's missing is we're missing a lot of like your traditional blue collar, maybe JD Vance. I don't know if you'd call him blue collar. He's kind of
no way. And Jose, he went to Yale,
but he come from kind of the lower class where he didn't come from high class, but that's why I don't know what to make of that. But we don't have like really blue collar people represented.
It's maybe. So few at the federal level. There's so few and far between. And I think largely it's because of money.
Yes, it's money, it's recognition. It's obviously if you're polished, you're going to be able to obtain more people to send you money to. And right. I just have to say Facebook started working late. So for all your Facebook guys, I apologize for the lateness of this, but we're here now.
And I will say too, like, I think the Utah Ledge, like most people in the Utah Ledge are either they're business owners or they're attorneys. And like a big thing is because like how many employers are going to say, oh, you're not going to be here for the next 3 months every year. That's fine. You know True. What I mean? Most won't do that, understandably. And it's like, now there's benefits of having an elected official work for you, but you know, a lot of them don't want to play those games. And so it's like, how do you have this space for blue collar people to work? Because you can't live off of a representative's wage in the state of Utah. They don't make as much as other states.
No, they
We're
don't.
we're one
I
of the
think it's
lower ones.
what is it?
$252 a day, I think.
It's some like $2,000 total. You know, I mean, it doesn't even cover the gas if you're
No,
coming from, southern counties.
right. And
Um,
that's the crazy thing for the Southern County guys, because you know they're having to like either get an apartment or a hotel, you know, for that length of time.
which I kind of like it like that. I like that representatives have a job, that they're not just career politicians. I mean, there's a lot to be said that career politicians has its benefits also. I don't know. I'm of two minds.
My
But
my
so
big thing is I just would rather lower the bar of access for people so we could have more viewpoints involved.
true. I mean, that's one thing. I think I don't know. I don't. I wish I had answers, but I don't. Remember, I'm low IQ guy. So, what do
Oh,
you think
okay.
about Mondani's message? What he's running on.
I think the biggest thing for Mondami is the rent situation. You know what I mean? And like I watched some of the debate and I was very frustrated because like they kept asking them questions about Israel and it's like, how does the New York mayor give a shit about what is happening in Israel? You know what I
Like when
mean?
Chicago forced that vote in their city council to
And
support
it's
Palestine. I'm like, you're the Chicago City Council. Don't you have like a pretty extreme murder rate? Like
right.
weekends are pretty rough in Chicago.
Right. And like that was my thing. It's just like I liked that when he talked, he kept to this idea of like, I understand regular New Yorkers because I think most of those people on the stage that he was up against, like the one guy, Brad, he is the heir to the Levi Strauss fortune. It's like Andrew Cuomo is from a very wealthy, connected family. And then you have
Oh,
this guy
yeah. The
who's like,
Cuomos are old time.
right. And it's just like I felt like his messaging was on point just because of the fact of like he talked about housing, he wants to freeze rent, which is really important for them, cracking down on really terrible landlords, you know what I mean? You know, just a lot of this idea of like and another big thing that I think was helpful for him in New York City was taxing the wealthy, the corporations and the 1%. Because I think that speaks to a lot of New Yorkers. Now, with that all in mind, I keep hearing that like him winning is a sign to Democrats all over the country that we need to change the candidates we run, right? The quit going with the establishment. And I think some of that's very true, but you could not run him in Salt Lake, even for Salt Lake mayor, and he would not win because he would be way too liberal for Salt Lake people.
Okay, so we've talked about a couple different things. I'm getting the sharing out of the way real quick. Sorry
You're
if I'm
fine.
slow on this, and then I've got to do a couple other things. But so tell me, okay, freezing the price of housing. What effects do you think that may have?
Well, it's going to be the freezing of rent, and then he wants to build like affordable homes. Now, I don't have a ton of experience with rent freezing because the only thing that makes me nervous with it is I think a lot of the times when we do stuff like that, landlords just find new ways to make you pay more. They just get more
Or
creative about it.
Well, here's one thing that I've heard. I've never been to New York City, but this is what I've heard is that over the just because of the rent controls that are in place right now,
Yeah.
that when the cost benefit analysis comes in and it doesn't carry the benefit to have to rent, it's cheaper for them to leave buildings or apartments empty.
Right. And that's very possible.
Because and apparently there's whole buildings in New York that sit empty.
Yeah, and
Because
like
it's cheaper. And
Yeah.
so what happens if he does that and we lose more housing in New York? Well, we don't. Obviously, won't
yeah,
affect
we're
me a
not
bit.
affected by any decision they
But
make.
if New Yorkers lose more housing, what happens then?
Yeah, and I think that's going to have to be a really because like I just think people
I think the Laffer curve also applies across everything. You know what the Laffer curve is, right?
no, can you
The Laffer curve is some scientist named Laffer crunched the numbers and came up. It's for taxes, where you tax so high that you disrupt the economy and therefore you make less.
yeah.
And I think that applies across everything. So what happens if they cross that with their housing? Like he makes it like he's talking about opening up city ran bodegas, the little
Yeah. I know
stores they have. What's that going to do to the people who've already invested and opened up bodegas there? One,
Right.
honestly, this is almost exactly what Venezuela did. And how are they doing?
Yeah, and I don't know enough. Like that's the thing is like I don't know enough to be like, yeah, you're completely wrong. I just think it'll be interesting because like if it is genuinely cheaper for them to keep it empty, which it might be, you know what I mean? Like what do you do then? I think it becomes that question of the other thing is too is like and I've been to New York City. It's always packed. And like I think more and more people are moving outside of and then just commuting into New York City for their stuff. You know what I mean?
Therefore, you lose those actual taxes. You still get some sales tax off those people, but you lose their actual taxes.
You could still potentially pay income tax. You could still potentially pay New York income tax. The only reason why I know
Maybe.
this is because my dad worked in Ohio and he had to pay Ohio tax and Pennsylvania tax.
Ooh,
He had to pay
see,
both.
that's rough. I would love to move to Wyoming, but I don't want to pay taxes twice. So how? But now, and also, we're moving into a new economic model globally. We've got a new economic revolution, the AI revolution, and of course, we're knee deep in the middle of working from home revolution.
Yeah, I live in the
So,
I'm the working home people.
and you work for a Canadian company, so it's a whole nother nation that you work with there. How does
Right.
that work?
Well, for my taxes, I only pay American tax and I pay Utah tax. Now, and but if I went to Italy and I worked in Italy for some time because I have EU citizenship, I would have to pay Italy tax and American tax because America is like one of 4 countries that like even if you live outside of the system, you haven't been there in years, you didn't do anything, you still
Come
have to pay
on.
tax to
We
Uncle
got to
Sam.
get ours. What are you doing? What do you
Oh,
think? You think you're
I
going to
hate
get away
that.
from this?
And then
You're
it cost,
born.
yeah,
You're born with the.
and it's $5,000 to recant your American
I
citizenship.
know you got to
on top
pay
of
to
it.
get out of it.
Yeah, like
Not that I ever would, but that is
no,
true.
same. But it's so crazy. But no, like,
But
and I
how
think
does that?
what?
What if I don't know? And I'm interested. One, okay, I don't want to see New York fail, but
No.
I would appreciate an example that you can't deny. Now, obviously, all of the left, and I don't consider all Democrats on the left, but I bet all of the left will come out just like they did with Venezuela and say, well, you guys made them fail. the capitalist countries. And we did not. Venezuela started failing in what, 2009? They just a steep decline. And we first put our tariffs on them in 2014. I mean, there's a big gap there, 5-year gap that.
And I think things that happened with Venezuela were larger than like the financial policies of the country. There was like also some crime stuff going on as well.
The crime stuff came after. Here's what Venezuela did. Venezuela went into expropriation mode.
Mm-hmm.
They would just walk into stores and say, that's now ours. That belongs to the state. There were a handful of U.S. companies that had companies down there. A big one was a toilet paper manufacturer. Interesting story comes out of there.
Deal.
Yeah, Maduro just came in and it was Chavez. It came in. Was it Chavez? Yeah, it came in and expropriated it. You can watch videos of him doing it. And so that company just, all right, we're gone. So what they did wrong is because they went into government run, they did what all socialist countries do. And socialism argues against it, but always runs on nepotism. Mm-hmm. Always. Every time. Doesn't matter where you are. They did that. And so everything around everything on the outskirts of their oil market failed. Everything. And so then they relied on their oil, but also with nepotism. South Africa is going through it right now. They didn't do upkeep on their oil system to keep that vibrant.
Right.
So 1, they made them a one product economy, and 2, they didn't maintain that product. And that's why Venezuela's done. Put price controls on. What does price controls do? It makes a market desert. Nobody comes around. Nobody will start up anything. They leave. Anybody with any kind of values, any kind of, not values, but anybody who brings value to a market, they leave. They go somewhere where their value is carried over. Mm-hmm. Except for the criminals. Criminals stick around because they tend to thrive in those situations.
Yeah.
And that's where Venezuela sits right now. Is New York going to fall in that same circumstance? Because you also mentioned he talked about raising the taxes on the wealthy.
Mm-hmm.
What happens? What happens when the wealthy start seeing those taxes come in awful heavy?
Well, it's going to be 1% or not. It's going to be, I'm looking up the tax rate. It's going to match New Jersey's, it looks like. But I think it'll be interesting in the taxing of the 1%, because you always hear, well, they'll just leave the state. They'll leave the area.
It usually depends on a couple of things. One is how high is the tax?
Right.
It depends on how high is the tax. And then is it more beneficial? Can they move their market value somewhere else and still maintain it?
Right. So New York.
There's a reason Nissan is now in Texas and Tesla is now in Texas. And, Oracle, I don't know if they're still centered in California, but they're here in Utah. That's where they do all their wares.
Right. So according to his website, it states that his goal is for the wealthy 1% of New Yorkers earning above $1 million annually, a flat 2% tax.
See,
I have a hard time believing the wealthiest 1% of New Yorkers are like 1 million seems like a very low amount.
Well, and a 2% tax is a low amount too.
Yeah, because that's what he's saying. He's going to do 2%, which if it's a flat tax at 2%, I don't think that'll be too bad.
No, they'll stick around for that. I imagine there might be some, like someone making just $1 million who's like, and there might be some that argue and look around for other places they can go, but I don't imagine that'll run off the successful. So it may not go too bad. No, it may not.
Yeah, that seems like a very reasonable thing.
Yeah, that 2% isn't heavy. I wonder about the bodega thing. How much economic damage will that do?
That'll be interesting because like a lot of families like anyone, you know what I mean, you start doing something, you know, you pass it to your kids, whatever. And it's like how do you plan on doing this to other, you know, businesses, you know what I mean?
Yeah, socialism sounds like a great idea till other people run out of money you want.
Yeah.
Percival, glad to see you're back. Says Canada is a socialist country. It is not run on nepotism. Well, one, I would argue Canada is not socialist because they still have they have heavy social programs, but they're not socialist. And also, I seem to remember Trudeau's wife being involved in a little bit of controversy, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, they got divorced.
Did they?
Mm-hmm.
What did he finally decide to lean into? Never mind.
I mean, like
I about went mean on that. I'm not gonna.
yeah, they got divorced. I was really surprised. But yeah, they separated in 2023, so they've been separated for 2 years. So it seems like with the bodegas, his goal, so he's not going to have the city run them. He's going to help people. He's going to cut small business fine in half, speed up permitting, and make online applications and increase funding for one-on-one small businesses.
Speeding up permitting, that's a free market idea. That's but that's not what he said on in his speech. He said he said his come out of his head.
Mm-hmm.
He said he's gonna open up. I'll try to verbatim it, but I cannot. He's gonna open up city-run bodegas where they don't have to pay property tax and they'll have price restrictions. Those are the words he said. Now, that may have been something he said early on before he actually sat down and formulated, because, obviously his website is probably a little more dynamic than something he may have said 8 months ago.
Right. And the other thing is too, is like, it's very likely, what's very likely is like they've fleshed out the ideas and done more research to make sure his website's up to date and like makes sense.
100%. And also he's probably got people on his staff now that are advising him saying, hey, look, that's not a measure that would work. This might be.
He doesn't have a big team, which really surprises me. His team for campaign size is not big.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, because like Cuomo had a ton more people working for him than Zoran did. And
Cuomo, I'm sure Cuomo comes in like Bush did with legacy cabinet, like his father's people, and because his father ran the city forever. And then his father was his father also the governor or just the mayor?
Well, Andrew was governor at one point.
Yes, but his father was also.
I think his dad was also governor at one point.
I don't remember if he was governor, but I know his dad was a mayor and a fairly successful one. He was,
Yeah, he was governor and lieutenant governor of New York.
Yeah. So, and that was a stepping stone until Cuomo started, getting too close. And COVID upset the apple cart across the world. COVID bared a lot of stuff. I mean, COVID was a naked nerve in a rotten tooth.
Yeah. Well, I think COVID made us more aware of like some of the craziness going on in the world. And because we were sitting at home with nothing to do.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, what does this look like for the rest of the world? And I think that was problematic.
Yeah. Yeah. I 100% agree.
It's like how my mom used to tell me. She used to be like, idle hands is the devil's work. And it's kind of the same idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no, it'll be interesting. I'm excited to see. Because I think Cuomo's going to run as an independent now that he lost the Dem ticket.
I know. Well, he talked about everyone was expecting him to. He did. What do you call it? Called him up and congratulated him or whatever they call it. And then they thought for a minute that he was going to throw his support behind Adams afterwards. But if he stays in as an independent and breaks it 3 ways,
There is no
all bets are off.
way. There's no way on God's green earth he supports Adams, because I think he knows that's like a death, a kiss of death for him.
Well, do you think Cuomo is going to pursue further political stuff?
Yeah, I think he's bored.
You think he's going to go for more political office?
I do.
Later
because-
on.
I do, because like the problem is like I think he's bored, and like I think they're just gonna let him, do that kind of stuff. Because I think he stepped out. He didn't want to leave the political spotlight, but he was forced.
No, he did not. Yeah, he got run out by the political machine there. One, I think he got run out because of the nursing home disaster that he was a part of. I think,
The
and
sexual harassment case.
and I think the sexual harassment was an excuse to separate the Democrat Party from him.
hmm
And honestly, I think that's what, because I think it was such a big scandal and it was so pronounced in New York,
Right.
that they separated it. They had to, the party had to figure out how to separate from it. And so, yeah,
Well, I
that's,
think they always knew he was a problem. You know what I mean? And it's like sometimes with any political party, they're like, oh, well, they're a problem. I get it. But, and it's
maybe.
just like, but I agree with you. I think that, like, for me, the nursing home deaths or him very openly like abusing his power for his own gain should have been the end of the relationship. But I think sexual harassment is like one of those things where people feel like it's like a green light to then separate. I don't know why it's like,
Especially for a Democrat Party
right.
in
Instead of
the throes of, what was it, 2020? That,
right.
the Democrat Party was still knee deep in Me Too. They were that. I'm glad that no one has ever falsely accused me of anything in that time, because a lot of stuff went crazy then.
Right.
I
Well,
think the
it's
thing that killed it was when they went after that Indian actor, that guy that was on Parks and Rec. When that girl
what is his name? I can see his face.
Akash, or no, that's the other Indian comedian. But when she went after him,
Azizi Azari.
yeah,
Azari.
for an awkward date, and then the internet kind of exploded at him, and then everyone else caught up to the internet and said, "What? He went on an awkward date with her." He sounds like he wasn't not he sounds like he didn't do anything abusive in there, and so,
Well, and that's the hard thing is like I think with these things like sexual assault is completely different. I think everyone's just like, yep, on board. But I think when it
100%.
comes to this sexual harassment situation, it makes it so hard because what might be sexual harassment for one person is not sexual harassment for another. And it becomes very difficult, especially when, you say certain things and it might not come across right or whatever. Cause like, and that's the hardest thing when it's sexual harassment. Cause like at my job, we're implementing a program right now for people to be able to report, things like that, whistleblowing stuff, and that's been the big training is like, what do we determine is sexual harassment in this place, and it's like, there's all kinds of, trainings and stuff available, but, if someone asks you if you want to go on a date twice and you say no both times and they keep asking, is that sexual harassment? Probably,
I'm not going to weigh in. Look, I'm a mechanic. I'll stay out of that. That's because to me, that's like, yeah, I'm not.
It makes it very interesting for sure.
Yes.
And you have to be very mindful of the people involved, you know. And like some of it too is just that is like when you're looking at these types of claims, especially at my job, it's like who are the people involved, what happened, and kind of work off of that. You know, you can't make quick decisions.
Yeah. Yeah. It's heavy.
Yeah.
It is heavy. But okay, so before we move on to more fun political subjects, I want to hurry up and I want to talk about your American Cancer Society drive you have going on right now.
Yeah. So I'm working on collecting donations for the American Cancer Society, Cancer Action Network. Right now, we're going to be going hopefully in September to DC to lobby for cancer bills because like right
Yes,
now,
everyone, I am talking with a lobbyist.
yeah, I
'Cause
don't.
I am a realist and I appreciate lobbyists. So go on.
Well, yeah, there's sometimes you need them, especially when it comes to this cancer stuff.
Well,
Um,
lots of reasons you might need a lobbyist.
right, and
You know,
it's so important to have someone that kind of knows how it all works. You know what I mean? Because you showing up to your representative is super powerful and great. But when you
Mhm.
have like 20 people with you saying, hey, this isn't working for
well,
us.
not just that, but 20 people that thousands of people donated to.
Mhm.
A lobbyist is the tip of the spear. That's the person that has the energy focused into them to deliver a message or to make a request or to, whatever else. So I believe lobbyists are appreciated. Now there are evil lobbyists,
For sure. For sure. There definitely
100%.
are. And I think too with something like cancer, when you go into these spaces like myself, and I could say, like, look, I'm a cancer survivor.
Mm-hmm.
I have a genetic mutation that makes me at a higher risk of having cancer. And explaining like that this is a never ending cycle for myself. It goes a long way with these electeds. You know what I mean? You can have the most you could if you had an elective who was the most either you just did not like them. They didn't breathe right in your mind. Most even them, they're going to have someone that they love and care about who's been affected by cancer.
Everybody.
Right. And they'll be willing to at least like listen and talk because people don't realize in this country how expensive cancer care can be. You know, when I was sick, my bill ended up being $1.2 million. You know,
Say
before
that again slowly for
my cancer bill was 1.2 or $1.2 million before
$1
health
million.
insurance. Yeah. Very expensive. And I have people that I work with a lot in the space. I have a lady that works really closely with us. She has ongoing cancer. And her shot that she has to get once a month is $3,000 after insurance. She is a retired school teacher. And some days it's, do I pay my rent or do I pay for this shot? And that's like the hardest thing you have to like look at is like, why are these pharmaceutical companies allowed to have these crazy prices and everything else? But so yeah, we're going this year. The biggest thing is that some of the bills, like with the big beautiful bill that President Trump was trying to push across, it had significant cuts to cancer research. In the first 3 months of his presidency, we've had about 33% of cancer research declined because they're not putting the money into it, which I can understand that the debt is an issue in this country, but I really would like us to see put his money towards our cancer research and explain why it's so important.
I've got a question in this. We talked a minute ago about how wonderful our pharmaceutical system is and how they don't run our nation and don't fund all the media and don't fund all the medical education systems and don't do everything they can, back to COVID, to eke every penny out of us. That debacle with the vaccinations was a complete boondoggle for the pharmaceutical, my belief, for the pharmaceutical money corporations just to make their money off of us. That's what I believe it was.
Mhm.
It never worked. Not for, I mean, sure, it may have had some on the outside, but it definitely didn't deliver as promised. Not even on the third promise after they figured out it wasn't delivering on the first two. It didn't deliver that. And now it's quietly, I mean, even all the news doctors that were on there, that Dr. Wu or whatever, she's coming out like separating herself from it when she was initially saying if someone doesn't get it, they should be locked in their homes and starved. Now
Mhm.
she's like, oh, we just need to forgive each other because, I mean, crazy things were said and done, you know.
Right.
I mean, but I wonder, I wonder, are we sitting in a perverse time where the cure for cancer is at our fingertips, but the pharmaceutical studies are being done for treatments of cancer because that's more profitable?
I mean, that's very possible but you look at things like what's come from researching is like the HPV vaccine, you know what I
Mhm.
mean? Which is really effective in treating cancers that are caused due to HPV. And like,
That's the isn't that an STI?
yeah,
Okay.
that's how it starts out. So like,
I
it's
tried
not,
to remember how to say that because we used
oh,
to
I get
call it
yelled at.
VD back in my army days, and now it's
I
something
grew
else.
up as
But
STD. Yeah. But
yeah,
like, no, so it starts as an STD and it can cause cancer, cervical, uterus, throat. And it's been very effective of taking care of those things and making it more preventative. And that's what I personally would like to see our government do more research on, is how can we make vaccines that create like the HPVs of the world less, you know?
okay. But and I agree. I just, now granted, a cure for cancer is the wrong word to use. There are so many different cancers.
Right. That's what makes
Um,
it so hard.
is there a universal cure? Probably not. But what I fear is that pharmaceutical companies will not pour money into chasing cures. They would rather chase treatments because they want them. It is more profitable, the bang for the buck. And I mean, it's evil, but realistically, can you blame them?
Well, and that's the nice thing about when the government does this, when the government's funding these types of research, it kind of takes a little bit out of the pharmaceutical, because like what happens a lot of time, take like the University of Utah. The University of Utah is one of the places in the country that does a lot of cancer research there through funding from the Fed. And it makes it really nice because they're not beholden to a pharmaceutical company.
But let me ask you a question. After they've made the discovery, do they then hand it over to a pharmaceutical company?
Yeah, and I don't know about that. I
I
can
mean,
tell you,
does that HPV vaccine come from
no,
a
it doesn't.
university?
No,
Where does it come from?
it comes from a pharmaceutical.
So that's where I think we find damage in the end.
Yeah. And like I think too, what the really nice thing is like one of the other really big things we're pushing for is more preventative surveillance. You know what I mean? Like certain people, you take, like, we've been working on a bill for the last few years where people that are African American, Black, they are more likely to be susceptible to prostate cancer and colon cancer. And so one of the bills that we have been working on was to require insurance companies to lower the age from 50 to 45 to do the cancer screenings for certain demographics. And that was one of them. And I think a lot of the times we look at like these insurance companies, they create these rules, you know what I mean, of everyone needs to start when they're 50. But
The
if you have
second evil company.
right, but if you say like, hey, my dad had a history of this, you know, they don't really care. They're like, well, you don't, so we're not going to do anything.
Yeah. Which I think honestly they should start PSAs. Every year when you get a physical, you get a blood draw. I
Mhm.
think a PSA test should be just done. I don't care if you're 18, just do a PSA test.
Yeah.
You know, you've already drawn the blood, fold that in.
You might as well at that point. And
And
that's,
then the colon cancer test, which they also look at your prostate while they're in there. They get in nice and close with the camera.
yeah.
You know, I imagine that's a crappy job, but I think that, yeah, I agree. They should, that should be, I would be fine if our government came down to insurance companies and says, you know what, we would like to see you start covering colon cancer tests. I think they should, honestly, it wouldn't be a bad idea if they started that at 30, just universally.
Right. And that's the thing is like, those are things we fight for, because it's like, I know my personal experience when I had BRCA2, my mom had breast cancer really young, but she didn't have any genetic components. My aunt got cancer for the second time, and she went to my aunt. My aunt doesn't have kids, and said, "Can you please get tested for genetic cancer?" She was positive, and I had her gene. Like, I had all of her paperwork. And I remember going to my doctor, and he said, "Your insurance won't approve this until your dad gets tested." It wasn't enough to say that my aunt had this gene. My biological aunt had this gene. They wanted me to have my dad get tested. And my dad is really struggled getting tested, because you have a sense of guilt a little bit of, I gave this to my kids, you know, when you have to face that reality. And so he was positive, and then my sister and I both got tested, and we were both positive. And that's the hard thing. I was with an insurance company. They had a round table at the Capitol last year, and there was someone from a couple of insurance companies at the round table, and I told them that story, and they said, "We haven't done that since the 90s." You know what I mean? They said the last time we had that was in 96 or 97. And I said, if that is true, I would have been 3 or 4, and I got tested at 20. You know what I mean? So someone is lying here, you know, that these aren't still your practices today.
Yeah. So yes, I think, I don't know. And how do you release the insurance companies of those perverse incentives?
Right. And that is the craziest part of it all, is like, there's just this underweb of just things that are going on that you don't see. You just see you've gotten denied. And it's like, how do you deal with that? You know, because that's like one of the hardest things I think in the States with health insurance companies is like, there is no, who do you cry uncle to when it's not fair anymore? Because like, I can tell you that this last cycle, I got surgery in August, and I've had difficulty getting my insurance to pay. And it was almost to a point, I almost hired an attorney, you know? And it's like, should you have to get an attorney every time? That's wild, you know?
That's you know, and it's only gotten worse. And here's the rough thing is, every time the government gets involved, it gets even worse. The ACA made the insurance process a nightmare and 3 times as expensive for your average guy. I was a blue collar worker, and overnight my premiums tripled and my coverage halved.
Right.
Overnight.
Right.
And right now, if you added up what I pay for insurance over my lifetime, I'll bet I never get anywhere near what I pay.
Well, it always crazes it drives me insane, because like, when you look at your employers, if you have that, your employer provides health insurance, you look at like the family, and it's like $1,000, and it's like, how can anyone afford this? You know, $1,000 a month from wages to pay for your little Tommy and Susie to have health insurance. Like, that's crazy.
Yep. So we're not going to hang on this forever, guys, because I want to, we've got lots of fun stuff to talk about in a short time. But how do I send people to this donation page of yours?
I put it on the Facebook chat, the
Yes.
Facebook group, so it's there. But if anyone wants to donate, I'm really easy to find on Facebook. If you just search Katie Adams Anderton, you'll
I'm
find
gonna
me.
yes on or and it goes when it pops up it's nippleless.
Yeah, because it's that's a running joke of mine.
I
It's
know
just like,
it's
yeah,
funny.
after you had a double mastectomy and you're like 22 and you're like, well, you got to kind of make this funny now, you know?
Well, I'm putting the link in all the chats right now.
Okay. Sounds
Yeah, I
great.
noticed that whenever I and I did share it onto all of my groups of pages because I think it is definitely a noble cause.
Thank you. Yeah,
Cancer is everyone gets to come in contact with it, and cancer affects 1 in 3 women and 1 in 2 men.
yep.
That's if you don't get it, that's
You-
the odds.
Yeah, my husband's family, his dad's side, they don't have a history of cancer in their family. And it always just shocks me because I'm just like, how? Like, what did you guys do? What holy grail did you find to not have that as a health issue in your family?
I picture it. They were in the Indiana Jones Temple of Doom movie and drank from the wooden cup, and the old knight said, "You chose wisely."
Yeah,
You know?
it's sometimes what it feels like.
And I wonder, you wonder if maybe it's not something in a genetic line way back in the caveman days that their line just lived somewhere else, had a different life.
Right. They weren't victims of the downwinders in Utah. Like
Or-
Utah people are like super healthy.
They are, unless you're in southern Utah.
Yeah, unless you're a downwinder, then
Mhm.
or you're getting, the arsenic that's under the Salt Lake.
Yeah.
That's going to be interesting to see how
Well,
many people get cancer from the Great Salt Lake.
another thing that feeds cancer is sugar, and there is a rise for those of you not in Utah. There is a rise of soda companies.
Soda shops.
Yep, that is our drug of choice in Utah lately.
It's crazy to me how many of my coworkers, it doesn't matter if they were in Denmark, Canada, South Africa, like everyone, because of TikTok and social media, they're like, can you tell me about soda shops?
The Mormon secret moms, what's it called?
Oh, The Secret Life of Mormon Wives or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I watched one episode. It was too much for me.
I don't watch television, so
yeah.
yeah, it's wild. My girlfriend Katie, she actually she is like a regional manager for a chain of soda shops.
That's
And
wild.
it is a definitely a thing out here in Utah. For anyone not in Utah, it is seriously a thing. I mean, there are people that I'm a coffee drinker. I wake up in the morning and I make my coffee, but there are people that if they don't get their swig or their fizz or whatever on their way
Right.
to work, they are unbearable.
Right. It's wild because I'm a tea drinker. I drink tea every morning, but like I took my mom. My mom was out here and I said, you have to experience this once. And she was just like, the wait getting into the swig was like 20 minutes. And she was like, people wait forever for this, for drinks. And I was
Mhm.
like, yes, people love them, and she definitely likes the diet Coke thing that everyone else likes. When she heard there was half and half in it, she was a bit odded out, but she was like, it actually was really good. So
Yeah, they you go in and personalize your Coke or your Pepsi or your Mountain Dew or and there are a couple that I really like from those stores. I like one that's water with coconut in it. I don't know what's in it.
Yeah.
You know,
I like the
It's-
kid ones, which is my problem. I like the
oh,
kid.
when they
Yeah.
when they
with-
put the
the
energy
gummy?
drink in it.
yeah. I'm like good with that. I can't do energy drinks still, but
Oh,
I,
yeah.
know, maybe someday.
Jordan says the government always makes things worse when it comes to being involved in healthcare and everything. And then he says, my mom had breast cancer. Cancer is horrible. And yes, Jordan, I am sorry for your mom. It's,
I hope she's doing well.
yes. We're getting feedback from your computer.
My cat
Yes.
is here, sorry.
Oh, you're okay. Cancer affects everyone. You know, I lost my grandfather to cancer. I lost an aunt to cancer. I have an uncle right now who is going on 7 years fighting one type of cancer. And then when they did the surgical removal of that, it jumped and now it's a new type of cancer.
That's the hardest when it metastasized.
Yeah. Everyone comes into contact with it. So everyone click that link, you know, if you can donate, send a nice word, friend her on Facebook, support it. And if you know, this is one of those good lobbyist groups, because you know it would be nice if we could take care of cancer. That'd be nice. You know, that'd be a big win.
It would. I'm just like, my big thing is, like, I tell people my aunt died at 32 of we don't know how it started out, ovarian or uterus, but had moved to her bowels, and that's when she found out she had it, and she died, and she left a 6-year-old. And it's like, I don't want to be that person, and I don't think many other people want to be that person where they leave family or children behind, you know. And it's like, I don't want that life, you know. And so it's important for things like this to help us and make sure we can get out there and find better cancer care, because you look at things like ovarian and uterus cancer is sometimes really hard to detect. So it's important.
It
We're
is.
getting better. We're
It
getting
is.
better, but
They need to come up with a PSA test for it. The PSA, that's revolutionary in prostate cancer. Revolutionary.
they're working on something right now, was the last thing I read when it came to it. Like a similar PSA test.
And they just keep testing the people who have it and find where they shine in those markers or whatever they call them.
Right.
Find that and then test it and prove it.
Yeah. I remember telling my OBGYN, I was like, we can go to the moon, but you can't tell me if I have cancer in certain
You
ways.
think we went to the moon?
I mean,
quaint. No, just kidding.
I mean, I personally think so, but
I don't know. Again, I don't know. Look, I'm losing right now. I'm questioning everything I believe and see. I question everything I see.
Do you think we've never gone to space, or like the first time they told it wasn't real, but since then we've made it real?
I don't know.
You don't know.
No, actually, okay. I'm going to tell you. I honestly believe we went to space because there's satellite TV and all that stuff. I mean,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
and I saw what's that lady singer that went to space the other day with Bezos's old lady?
Oh,
Katy Perry.
yeah,
She's an astronaut now. We've been
There-
to space. She come down and kissed the earth and had a daisy with her. You know, we've been to space. Now, Katie may have been the first person in space, but we've been there now. I believe it. But no, about the moon, I don't know. I tease about it because that's an ongoing funny conspiracy joke.
it's one of my favorite conspiracies. But
I'm a Bigfoot guy. I dig Bigfoot. Aliens are pretty cool. I don't know. I've been on ghost hunts. That's fun. I'm not necessarily a
hunts?
believer.
Yeah, I'm not a big believer in ghost stuff. Even though I grew up like in Pennsylvania, where people like go to Gettysburg and like try to outlive. There's a
Dude.
hotel there that, like, if you stay the whole night, you get your money back. 'Cause they
Really?
say, like, yeah, because the ghost really messes with people.
The
My-
hotel staff, I mean, the
Yeah.
ghost.
Yeah, the
Well,
ghost.
I'll tell you, Gettysburg is, if you believe in ghosts, you're going to feel something there.
Yeah.
Because and as a person who studies history, I remember standing up on the cannonade and looking down, and picturing
Right.
the armies moving up on the hill and everything else, and it's wild. It's amazing to think about. And and then there's other things. We don't need to go into climate change today, but anyways, Jordan says, yo, Jared, where's Holly? Tell her to get herself on here. She's missing out on the party. I agree. Holly right now is tied up. She may be back next week. Let's hope so. Everybody keep her in your thoughts and prayers that she can make it on the show next week. So let's close out the cancer chat. Everyone, follow the link that's in the comments there. Let's fight cancer. That's a fight I think everyone can get behind. Cancer doesn't care about your political party, your wealth, your status. It doesn't care if you're a movie star or anything, and cancer took John Wayne. So let's deal with that. So let's go on to, because we got about 45 minutes left. Let's go on to, you're a soothsayer. Let's talk about the 50-51 No Kings March shooting that happened here in Salt Lake. Because you said the night before that show, you said, don't take guns to those things and don't do this. And sure as crap, the next day, a guy was carrying a AR style rifle, and another guy who
peacekeeper,
a peacekeeper who was unqualified to be an armed servant at an event, fired blindly into a crowd.
Yep.
And killed a third totally innocent person.
Yep. And a good man, good father.
Sure, good man, an innocent person, a guy who was just there regardless. He was just there marching with people,
right?
And he got shot because some other guy shot at another guy.
Well, and that's the hard thing is like the gentleman who was arrested, Arturo, he is very well known within the protest world that he does this. He goes to places with guns because he's one of these people that is like, he's very liberal. And then the other thing is too, is that he's kind of like one of these people who want to like open carry. He's very supportive of open carry.
Well, he's okay. So to break it down for you guys, he is, from looking into him, an anarchist communist. Now, you've got the left has this spectrum. Okay, so the right covers its spectrum and the far right love guns. And then as you move more towards the moderate right, that's where conservatives quit liking guns. And then you've got your left, and they dislike guns further into the left. But once you get to your extreme left, again, you cross over into the field where they love guns. And so it's the people on the extremes that love guns. What does that say about me? I love guns. Maybe I'm an extremist. Maybe I need to wake up. But I'm an extremist in the middle, kind of weird area.
Right.
But, so you learn that as you drift into, maybe it's the people who distrust the current form of the government and or economics. But so this guy, he was a member of a band, a drummer in the band,
right?
Like an anarchist communist band. I don't know, like a punk band, maybe. I haven't heard the music.
Yeah, my understanding it's like punk music, and he's very like well known. He's young. He's 24. Like these are just some of the things. But what was just so crazy because it was like he had a gun and like it had no bullets in it. You know what I mean? And this guy who was a peacekeeper who has been identified as a military veteran. You know what I mean? They asked military veterans or, something like that, police to be these peacekeepers, didn't tell the police that they were there, didn't put on their permits that they had hired private security for this event. And it's like, how do you do this? And it just felt so sloppy. It's so bad right now that the main national 50-51 has like they've completely separated from the Utah chapter. And what's so crazy is like people are trying to figure out who is behind the Utah chapter, and there isn't like any like real solid like Susan's doing it or Bob, you know what I mean? Like it's all so tight-lipped and secretive that we just don't have a lot of answers.
Well, I imagine it is. They're probably afraid that they'll get wrapped up in a heavy lawsuit.
And I think they should.
They should, but they're. I imagine everyone that's on the committee of that, if didn't know about this hiring of peacekeepers, and I don't care if the guy's a vet. 95% of vets aren't qualified to carry a gun to defend other people in public.
Mm-hmm.
I fully believe that everyone should be able to carry a gun to defend themselves and their family. But to randomly defend other people, the gun is there for you to escape. The gun is the extreme means of escape. If you can just run, just run. The gun is there if you've got to escape by extreme means. Right. And I'm a person who trains people into guns. And that's what I teach them in the class. Like, the gun isn't there as a trophy. It's not there to make you feel tough. It's not any of that. It's just your means to escape under extreme circumstances.
Yeah. And that's the crazy thing, is just like, it feels so hodgepodge. It's very clear. Like if you do protests, it's very clear. Like some of this was very professionally done. I think having some of these empty like shell companies that were behind like permits and stuff, you know what I mean, was very well done. The problem where you start getting into is like the organizing aspect of the actual people was the problem. You had these peacekeepers that are inviting, it looks like probably military veterans to do this and be the peacekeepers. What type of, like, when they were talking to these people, what was it like, hey, what's your training? Like, when was the last time you had some form of gun training? And it doesn't seem like those questions were being asked. And in addition, it's like, you know, they're not asking that question. And then, they were asking people to like actually sign who was there at the protests, which if you do typical protests, you don't do that kind of stuff. You don't have
they were just looking for numbers.
I wonder. I don't know if it was numbers or data, but it's like, my dad is a super liberal, God bless him. And he went down to the King's protest in my hometown. And he was like, yeah, they made me do a registration. And I was like, why is anyone making people do registrations for protests? Like, the idea is the anonymous, you know, to be able to go there and not face repercussions. Because I said, the problem is, as I said, what happens if someone wants to subpoena who was there? You know, and now you have this Utah situation. Like, someone has data of everyone who signed up to be there. And now that we have this, it's going to be a problem.
Oh, that is shady. Well, let's go through more of the incident, because that is shady. That's another thing. We'll have to see what comes out of that.
Right.
But so the drummer in the band, he's carrying this rifle. The reporting that came out from the peacekeepers, which they should be put on charges for lying. They said, they yelled, he's got a gun. They yelled at him to drop the gun, and then they ran towards him and then shot. And then everyone thought he was, and then video came out.
Right.
And the guy, the drummer, is just carrying the rifle, pointed at the ground. The peacekeeper just draws and shoots at him, fires 3 rounds blindly into a crowd. I am, humble brag, I am an excellent shooter. Mm-hmm. Excellent shot. I am not going to take a shot if there is anybody behind my target.
Right.
I am not going to take a shot if there's anybody within 2 feet to the sides of my target. And I can drive nails, but I am not going to take that shot.
Well, and that was the craziest thing about it for me, seeing the video of seeing how many more people were around, because it felt like gun safety 101 is like
Yes.
is like, what are you doing? Do you know what I mean? And I am not like, I don't own guns. I used to shoot
I
archery.
need to correct that in you. I need to change some of those things. But anyways, go on.
I don't have anything against guns. I grew up with them, and it's like that to me would have been like a, oh hell no moment, and it was like no, it was like there was no thinking involved of like
Yeah.
the other people around,
The guy went in there with a puffed up chest, the peacekeeper, and
right?
he let that puffed up chest carry the day. He thought he was going to be a hero, and now he's a villain. Here's a question. What would the Democrat activist group have done had that been a police officer that took that shot?
I mean, you would hope the police would be more trained,
No, but if a police
but it
officer
did happen.
if a
I-
police officer did exactly those steps that the peacekeeper did, I think the Democrat activist group one would have burnt down at least Salt Lake City, and they'd have probably burnt down other big cities.
Possibly. I think the other thing that's very telling is they would have demanded for the police officer to be charged, and we're not seeing that with this peacekeeper. I don't they've
They've now arrested him, but they're not putting his name out. They're not putting. It's almost like the police department are under orders that now keep your mouth shut.
right, and it's so
When
wild.
before they were wide open. They're like, we arrested this guy. He posed a danger. He caused the dangerous situation. And then the video came out. I remember I tweeted the Salt Lake City Police Department. I says, why'd you arrest the guy who didn't fire a weapon?
Right, and that didn't
And they
have
never
any
responded.
bullets in his gun, and that's what's been getting my goat. Luckily, they wanted to keep him in prison longer. Sim Gill was like, "Hey, judge, I know I've
What
hit the
Sim Gill
72."
was? Sim
Yeah.
Gill, he's such an honest actor on the stage. He just
I like Sim Gill as a person. Like he's a
I
very
like
nice
Sim
guy,
Gill as a chalk block.
but sometimes he does things, and you just go, "What are you doing?" You know what I
'Cause
mean?
he's
And this is one of those moments.
He's an activist prosecutor.
I was just so like, how can you keep this guy in here past 72 hours when you don't have charges? You're asking the judge to give you an additional 72 hours. You know what I mean? Luckily, he got bonded out, but he had to give his passport over to his attorney, and it's like,
Yep.
well, why? Like, why
Are they
does
going to give all that back now that the video's out and it shows that he did absolutely nothing
right?
illegal?
Like, and it feels Sim Gill's still like, well, we're thinking about charges still. And it's like, no, like Sim, this isn't
And-
your guy.
And those idiots in Salt Lake will reelect Sim Gill every time.
Yeah. Yeah. I fortunately don't have to vote in that race. But it's just so baffling to me because it's just like, he's not your guy. Arturo luckily has a really great attorney who also is my attorney, which is Greg Skordas. And
Good.
Greg Skordas is like one of the best criminal defense attorneys you could ever get in this state.
Everyone take note. Greg
Yeah, if you
Skordas.
need a criminal defense attorney, call Greg Skordas. But I'm glad to hear that they've arrested the peacekeeper, but it'll be interesting to see like what happens from that. The other thing is I don't understand why there's such a protective nature for this peacekeeper. Like that just seems very peculiar to me.
I'll give you my 2 cents on that. Mendenhall is extreme left. And Mendenhall, I'm sure, through her maneuvers and her demands, people that work for her diligently are going to be people who can at least stomach her ideals. And Mendenhall would lick broken glass to protect that peacekeeper. And so her at least her police command and her
Right.
prosecutors will be the same.
And I don't understand, like, who is this person that we're like so hell bent on protecting? Do you know what I mean? Like,
Well, he's a leftist protester. I mean, no offense, but the Democrat Party went out of their way to protect people who were burning cities and murdering people.
but the thing, what's weird here is that Aaron Mendenhall doesn't like the Democratic Party.
Yeah, because they're not left enough.
No, well, she also thinks the Utah Democratic Party is a joke, which she's semi not wrong in some places.
Well,
but,
yeah, but that's like saying that the California Republican Party's a joke.
right.
They're a joke because they're non-existent in they're the tiniest fish in their water.
And Mayor Mendenhall is not super leftist. She is a genuinely moderate Dem. I think like when you meet her, you know what I mean? Like that's been my experience with her.
Well, look, I'm not saying super leftist people are bad. I have lots of friends that are super left.
Yeah.
You know, it's everyone's coming at it from their own ideals. I mean, just because their desires is destroyers of cities doesn't mean that they're evil. They're delusional.
Yeah. I just like, my question was like, is this guy rich? You know what I mean? Is he like, what
Is he
what
connected?
Right. Like that's my thing is like, who is he? I don't think she's doing this because of like loyalty to like political ideology. Like,
I
it's
don't think
too
Aaron
weird.
Mendenhall's doing this.
Yeah.
I think the ideology that is fostered from her office bleeds into offices that have more deference to not charge.
And that's very possible. I
Like a
they went
prosecutor
on
like
Glenn
Sim Gill would be the tip of that spear, and he could choose not to charge.
Because you would think, right, from a leftist point of view, you have a punk rock kid who's 24, who's a person of color, who, like, you would think you would, if, like, you found out that a white guy could potentially be the enemy, you would immediately shift and be like, okay, I'm going for the white guy. But that's the thing. None of it makes sense at the moment. Does that make, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but one guy is on the left side that is bad. They're on the communist side, which communists like guns.
Yep.
Communists, especially anarcho-communists, they like guns. They support gun rights. This guy is known to bring guns to events. He's well known.
He's brought them to Black Lives Matter events because like a bunch of my friends, they were like, we've seen him at those protests because I don't do protests. Like that's not for me.
Yeah, me neither.
Like, especially like after this, like it was interesting, not funny, but like a lot of my friends who were there, because as soon as I found out about it, I was getting text messages and I'm calling the people who I knew who were there to see if they were okay. And like a lot of them were like, man, I've never been in a place with a mass shooting. And I was like, you've lived a very privileged life. Let me tell you, it's going to be okay.
And that's not even a mass shooting.
No.
That's a moron who, well, it's rare for me to say that person should not be armed in a public place. He proved that. Or maybe it was a she. I don't know.
It was a dude.
Oh, okay. Maybe it was
we do know it was a guy. We just like past that. My big thing is like, it's going to be very interesting to see what Arthur's family does. The gentleman who was killed. It'll be very interesting to see what they end up doing with all of this. Cause I think they're still grieving.
I hope they make it so that his kids don't have to pay for college.
Yeah. And I've been watching,
and I'm talking a good college.
Right. They did
one of them coastal numbers.
One of those like Harvard level. They've been doing like a GoFundMe for him. And it's been pretty incredible because like every time I see it, they have to increase the number to like how much they've almost raised $500,000.
Good. And then I hope they sue all those shell companies. And that's another thing. I'm not comfortable with shell companies setting up protests.
No. but I understand why
That
they're
makes me
doing it.
think it's shady. That makes me think there's some shadiness going on.
Right. And I understand from a like legal perspective why you might want to do that, but at the same time it becomes that question of like my boss has a saying at work and it's really funny. He said, "Who's going to be the one throat to choke if things go bad?" And it's like this too. It's like, well, who everyone's trying to figure out who is that one throat to choke for the situation and no one's giving it to anyone. You know what I mean?
Yep. And then you want a peaceful protest, so you hire peacekeepers that commit the ultimate violence. That's
Right.
like, you remember when you hear about that concert in the 60s where they hired the Hells Angels to
Yeah.
be bouncers at the concert, and the Hells Angels got out of line and stabbed a guy and he died? That's
Yeah,
kind of
you
where
have to
I'm
remind
thinking.
yourself you hired Hell's Angels. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So you hired people who are, and look, you can become ideologically retarded on either side of the aisle, right? You hired an ideologically retarded guy who's trapped in this left-wing mindset of we're under ultimate threat, so I'm going to carry a gun at a protest.
Well, and that's the crazy thing is like and this goes back to a little bit to gun ownership. I think you have to look at yourself as a person and be like, am I responsible enough to be a gun owner? And in this case, I would say no. He is
Well, I would argue this guy may be responsible enough to be a gun owner. He wasn't responsible enough to be given the mantle of being a peacekeeper.
yeah, and I would
That's a
agree with
different
that.
animal. This guy may be a 45-year-old guy who's had a gun all his life and done just fine.
The
But
other
it's when they gave him the mantle, when some shell company, some group that's now gone underground like cockroaches, said, we're going to get armed peacekeepers. Would it have been better had they said, we're going to hire people to wear yellow vests? They're not going to be armed. What they're going to do is they're all going to have a radio,
right, something
and they're
of that
going
nature.
to call, and then we're going to be able to tell the police if there's something coming up, and let the authorities that have been duly enshrined with the ability to manage those situations manage those. Instead, what they did, the organizer said, I like the idea of vigilantes, and that's what they did.
And it's if this goes to a lawsuit, I think one of the really key questions the victim's family needs to ask is, how was these people selected? Where
Yeah.
did you find them? How did you select them?
Yeah.
Because you
Was it
look at
off
some-
the Antifa yellow pages?
right, like who knows where these people came from, you know? And like
Mhm.
that's the hardest thing is just like knowing that those kind of details. But I don't think this is the end for us in Utah. I think this is going to be very interesting to see how this goes forward.
Yep. Okay. We beat that one not to death, but we beat it close.
Yeah.
We may resurrect it again another day. We've got 20 minutes. Let's talk about the big one, that Minnesota, where Minnesota,
Yeah.
where two reps were killed by, what's that guy's name? Vance.
One representative,
Yeah, one rep.
one was killed, another one was injured, and their families.
Yes, and so did someone dressed in a cop uniform wearing a like spooky Halloween mask.
Yeah, one of those latex things that are you see
Yeah.
on like TikTok, and you're just like, oh, so you can become a whole new person now.
Yeah,
It's
it
one of those
went to Rep Melissa Hortman's house and killed her and her husband. I think his name was Mark.
And the dog.
Oh, and killed the dog. That's it. String him up. No
Yeah,
trial.
I was like,
Killed the dog. Oh, geez. And then went to Senator Hoffman's house. So a state rep, and then a state senator, Senator Hoffman, and shot him and his wife. They were 5 miles away, and they lived. The senator and his wife both lived, and that might have been the guy was amped up from his previous murders. I mean, lots of things get in the way of shoots, which thank God, that the death toll didn't raise. I mean, it's terribly sad that there were 2 people that died. I don't believe that violence should be a part of our politics unless it becomes an extreme one. And then then they identified a guy named Vance Bolter, who is a security supervisor, something or another, and then the conspiracy theories, which are the juiciest of the juice.
Yeah. That's
He was
always-
on. He was on.
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
he was on some kind of public committee hired by the administration of Tim Walz. Governor Walz. Whether Walz hired him and knew him personally, I don't know.
Yeah, he
But-
had been appointed to that board. It was
Yes.
a board. He had been appointed before by the representative, by Tim Walz's predecessor. And I will tell you, it's not very uncommon that
just
you just keep the old
carryover.
people. Yeah, you just carry over. And so,
Well, you got their contact info. Why wouldn't you keep him? I got his
Right.
number. Do I want to go hire another guy
Right.
to do blue
you-
collar security advisement?
right, free work, which is most likely what that was. And so
Yeah.
they kept him. And like, that's where I don't think Tim Walz had anything to do with this.
Yeah. Though the conspiracies are fun. Like he's
Wild.
saying now from court that Tim Walz had him do it. Which,
Right.
look, Tim Walz, I don't dislike the guy. I mean, he's a boob, but I don't dislike him. But I don't see him. But maybe, I mean, that'd be the ultimate conspiracy that he is a boob, but on the background he's like a savage assassin hire. But if he is,
There's no
you'd think
way.
he
He's
would
too
go.
much of a goober to do so. Like,
He-
who's he going to call? You know,
What if he's this evil mastermind? You think maybe he would go 2 steps removed to hire someone and not go
Right.
like the closest guy to you? Hey, how you doing? I got a job
Right.
for you. I heard you got guns. I don't know how to run them. Obviously, you saw the video. I mean, it was a simple shotgun, and I can't figure that one out. But if you could do me a favor,
Well-
then they tried saying it was the Democrat Party that had him do it because she voted against an abortion bill or something. I don't remember.
yeah, that was one of them because she had voted against the abortion bill that like the Dems did it, but like was just where, in my opinion, that was like when he was found and they found a list of like 70 other
Yes.
Democrats who he wanted to take out.
Well, now was that list all Democrats?
Probably wasn't all Democrats because it had some like pro
I heard it was
abortion providers or advocates and
well, and I
lobbies.
heard it was politicians. Now, let's state the facts. Vance Bolter is an interesting cat. That's the dude. He's tried starting a church. He's tried becoming like a Christian martyr type person. So that's where I'm going to put my leanings, is that he is a religious person who dislikes abortion that much.
Right. I think the truth, and the other thing is too, is to have such an elaborate plan to try to kill as many as 70 people because of whatever reason you've decided. I think you almost have to look at that person as what they are, as someone who's not mentally stable.
Oh, a nut job, a complete nut job.
Yeah.
Let's pretend that he was successful with all 70 of those and he did it for abortion. Do you think abortion would go away the next day?
No, that's the thing that kills me with
Do
like
you think that maybe even the pro-abortion side might gain a couple extra votes that were sitting on the fence?
right. And that like that's the thing that gets my goat with these types of situations, because it's like abortion is going to happen. Even with people trying to outlaw it in different states, it's going to keep happening. It's just not going to be safe. Or they're going to go to another state and get it. So it's like why did you think that this would help your cause? Like, if you genuinely believe in this cause, why did you think this would help it? You know
That
what I mean?
makes me lean towards he was just going for revenge.
Yeah. And it just becomes
And
that question of why, you know?
let's face it, I am not pro-abortion, but that is a dumb way to go about it. I also believe you can't legislate morality.
Yeah, and that's kind of my thing. Is just like I'm for abortion just for the sake of like safety and health. It what changed my viewpoint as a young person because I wasn't very pro abortion. I think everyone, truthfully, it would not get an abortion if they did not have to. But what changed my viewpoint was reading medical journals from OBGYNs during the times that it was illegal and like the amount of women that were dying from backdoor abortion care, which was just so crazy. And it's like you said, you can't legislate morality. And it's like, these people are still going to get this. They're going to still actively go do this. So why not do it in a safe space? Somewhere they're
You
going
know,
to be safe and healthy.
you want to hear a funny story is I was even more ambivalent on it until I saw all of the shout your abortion stuff and
Yeah.
all of that. And that pushed me towards, okay, this is just evil people sacrificing to Moloch.
Right.
So
Well-
it's interesting that what pushed me over was people that were like movie stars and that shouting pro-abortion stuff and wearing those shirts, shout your abortion. And I've had, 7 abortions. Like, really? Condoms
Yeah.
are easy to get. They're easy to get. They're
Right.
not, I mean, unless you're in one of them cities that have a lot of looters, like they're right there. You just pull them off the little hook and walk them to the front, and you can buy them in a pack. You can order them online. You can order condoms online and have a big old box of them mailed to your house that could last a reasonable person a very long time.
Right.
There's
Yeah, I've done that for some of my relatives when they turn 18. It's like the giant fishbowl of condoms and being like, please be safe. But
yeah.
it is very interesting, but I look at it from a completely like medical because like women died like and it was like desperate people for a multitude of reasons why they couldn't do it. And I think this is the hard thing. I think when you have silver spoon liberals get involved in
Ooh,
certain
silver
things,
spoon. See, we call them limousine liberals
I mean that's fair too. I like
or Chardonnay. What is it? There's limousine liberals and Chardonnay socialists or Chardonnay communists.
it's interesting. I've always just called them silver spoon, but
Okay.
I think sometimes when they get involved in the conversation and they just made things like 20 times worse, you know
Mhm.
what I mean? It like, because like people who are getting these service, I sat through one of my friend's abortion when I was younger. And for her, she had been doing drugs, those kind of things were going on. And it's like, if this child is born, they're going to not have a really great life. And that's why she got it. And she's turned her life around completely.
Well, I don't think that's an argument to kill someone if they have a bad life.
Well,
Because if you follow that to its logical conclusion,
the thing is though, is like the type of drugs she was taking wouldn't have survived. You know what
yeah.
I mean?
But I mean, that's just,
Yeah, I'm not
I don't
disagreeing.
like following that to its logical conclusion because remember, there was a guy with a goofy mustache who killed some religious folk and then killed some ethnic folk. And then the other group he killed were the folk that had, extra chromosomes.
Yeah. No, and like for me, it's just like when you have situations like that, like people have reasons for doing this stuff, and I just would rather
I-
it be safe.
I agree. I think here's another interesting one. The ACA, it's going to be studied in 50 years as a shift. It really is. Abortion was dead and gone. The argument about it was dead and gone. The Clintons did a lot to say, hey, we'll support it, but it should be safe, legal, and rare.
Right.
And then the ACA came out and they tried forcing religious groups to not only offer the morning after pill, because that's the argument the Democrats gave. They want to stop the morning after pill. They
Well-
wanted religious groups, including like nunnery insurance, to offer late term abortions, voluntary abortions. And I was like, that's not the hill to die on. And all of a sudden, abortion's a big thing in the news again. That is
Well-
not a hill to die on. Don't force nuns to cover abortion insurance
Well,
for nuns.
it became a problem with the Supreme Court case Burnell versus Hobby Lobby, because Hobby Lobby didn't want to pay for contraceptives because they had religious objections to it, and the Supreme Court was found to be on Hobby Lobby's side, and so that's what stopped.
Shouldn't there be voluntary association? Okay, I would agree with you if Hobby Lobby went and snatched you out of 9th grade and then you were in servitude and forced to work for Hobby Lobby for the rest of your days. Hobby Lobby, I'm sure, doesn't pay their people extremely well. And also, it's voluntary association. So if Hobby Lobby didn't cover the contraceptive you wanted, regardless, I've heard arguments that Hobby Lobby just wouldn't cover certain of those contraceptives.
No, they didn't want to cover anything.
And so Hobby Lobby did it as a religious thing.
Mhm.
Shouldn't that just be, if that is something you want to pursue, I would imagine, unless you lived in Hobby Lobbyville and that was the only job in town, that falls under voluntary association in my mind.
Well, and you have two, like Hobby Lobby also has like corporate stuff, and they get paid really probably more than an office,
And
more than your store.
sure, and I'm sure 100% of those people in their corporate offices could have went anywhere else and made the same amount of money and got the contraceptive they wanted.
The problem with this case, in my opinion, and my viewpoint, is birth control can be used for other things except birth control, including, birth control. So you take
Mhm.
my situation. I have BRCA. I have a high increase of cancer. They have found with people like myself who have BRCA, if we take birth control, hormonal birth control, it lowers our risk for ovarian and uterus cancer. So with this case, they still didn't have to pay, for birth control.
Well, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
So you work for a Canadian company
Yes, I do.
and outside the US company. And let's say by chance Canada pulled its head out of its collective ass.
Yes.
And Canada, now this isn't the pulling the head out of the collective ass, but there's a lot of other issues Canada has to deal with, namely guns and the First Amendment and not stealing money from people who protest. I'm just going to throw those out there as just some simple examples. And hiring a guy who, is just a total fag. But, and I don't mean that in the homosexual way. Trudeau's just, he makes boobs look manly. Anyways,
That's so funny that you say that, but continue.
let's say this Canadian company you work for said, we don't want to cover that.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep.
You have a certain set of skills that you could take to another company. Should that company be forced to cover, or let's say me, I don't know if Canada covers, say, Cialis. And let's say I wanted to make a bathtub commercial.
Yeah.
Should I force Canada to cover, or should I exercise? Which would be better for long-term humanity? The ability to exercise voluntary relationships, or forcing people to do things that goes against their creed,
Mm-hmm.
and letting the chips fall where they may.
Yeah, and I think it's a very, for me, it becomes that question of who is your ideology on first, and by the Constitution, you could say, yeah, it's very much on first because of the First Amendment, right? But then you have this other idea of like, but is the wellness of a person more important than this? You know what I mean? And
Well,
that becomes the question, you know?
here's where my mind takes me on that. If I follow those to their logical conclusion, is it better that I'm not forced to bake a cake for a Nazi versus me not allowing a company to fail because their ideology is too ridiculous?
Right. The other question that comes to mind though is when did the corporation become a person?
Oh, well, that became a person under Citizens United, obviously.
Well, but that's the thing that drives me insane with
Well,
this.
it kind of became a corporation.
It became a person that is capable of exercising religious beliefs. Like that to me is like really uncanny at times.
Here's a question. Would you want corporate Mormonism or corporate Catholicism or and Judaism? I don't know if their synagogues can be set up like that because I don't know if they're tied together the same way. But would you want them to not be able to exercise their morality?
I think it's different because like you look at it, they're set up as those entities are non-profit, right?
Yeah.
It's the for-profit.
Now, hold on. Say
situation.
that again. Say that again for the people.
They're non-profit?
Are they? Are they though?
No, but
Tell me more.
they're not non-profit, but like
Come
they are,
on.
you know.
That's what they are.
They're supposed to be.
Uh-uh.
That's why they don't get
No.
taxed and all that fun stuff.
Non-profit. Well, I picture churches such as the Mormon Church, the Catholic Church, those organized large churches as kind of a hybrid where they'll have two entities within the church. They'll have the religious side, which is the not tax side, and then they'll have the business side, which commonly does get taxed. And yes, the business side does use the religious side to avoid that. But
Yeah, I saw that a lot.
and we got off track here. We're into a higher ideal functioning argument. I personally would like to. My religion is worshiping individual rights, and so I would like to believe that individuals are employed by a corporation, and therefore, because of that, because of my desire to protect the individual's right for freedom of association, I will turn it around and also give the corporation that levity, because I would hate to see it a day when the corporation will argue, well, because there technically is no right for freedom of association, this employee of mine will no longer have the ability on whatever level to have freedom to disassociate from us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's like the hardest thing about all of this. You know what I mean? Because it just becomes that like who's on.
That's
first.
why you just don't write overarching laws that get into the weeds.
I mean, yeah, like
Imagine
once again, it's like I was telling someone today or this week at work. You have to acknowledge like even your best of political bills is going to fuck someone over
every time.
And that is just the common space we live in, is like it's going like someone is going to get hurt at the end of this, and you have to be okay with that. You know what I mean?
100%.
And
I just want I want to try to make it so that the hurt doesn't bleed into other hurts.
Yeah. And that's,
whereas if you just say, okay, we're going to give religious carve outs for this, employees of Hobby Lobby, go work somewhere else and make it better. You know how to beat Hobby Lobby? Start your own Hobby Lobby. Hobby.
You have Michael's.
Yeah. Start Michael's. Make Michael's to where. Have you ever heard the story? Now I'm passing on a story that I just heard. I don't know if it's true, but there was a guy with the last name Albertson. Now, this only really applies to here in Utah and Idaho, that worked for Smiths at one time. And Smiths did him dirty, so he said he was going to compete with Smiths. And there for a time, he started a business called Albertsons that beat Smiths and ran Smiths out of multiple cities.
That would be a beautiful story.
It might be complete BS, but that's what you do is you make it so that Hobby Lobby says, wait a second, we're losing support. We should conform.
Right.
Or they'll stand by their laurels, and I fully believe that Hobby Lobby should have the right to suffer the consequences for their convictions.
Mm-hmm.
Because I am a firm believer that when this nation was founded by men who read history and men who studied and men who found joy in theory, that they said freedom of association is something that we must enshrine. You know what? We must enshrine it so much that we're going to wrap it into the very first argument we make.
Yeah.
And
Well,
then some nut job sat there and said, and to protect that one, we're going to put guns as the second argument.
Mm-hmm.
And
It's always very interesting to see what to the founding fathers was most important, and like to kind of view for that lens, because you think about like guns and militias, like that was a big deal because of how the British treated them. Search and seizure was a big issue. You know, I mean, a lot of the amendments they had was really applicable to what was going on at the time. What sucks is like we haven't done much since then to make it more applicable to today, because a lot of the times, like I read a lot of case law, and they try to put these case law with some of these amendments where it's like, I think this is a bit of a stretch of what
Sure.
you're trying to make this sound.
sure,
you
but
know?
how many times does the Fourth Amendment get abused, or the Fifth?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a big thing right now that every time you interact with a police officer, the police, if you interact and they put you in handcuffs and haul you to their station and get ready to talk to you, they have to give you a Miranda rights warning. And
Yeah.
that's your warning of the Fifth Amendment. And that's something that was ignored until, God, the Miranda rights came out in the 40s. That was, I think, Miranda v. Ohio
It was Miranda versus Arizona.
or Arizona. And was it in the 40s? How far off was I?
66.
Or in the 60s,
Yeah.
right? That's something that carried on and was probably abused for all that time until a lawyer said, wait a second, the ability to keep your mouth shut is the Fifth.
Right. And that was a very like, this was a very interesting case. I had to study it in college. Because like it wasn't a landslide decision. It was 5-4 in favor of overturning the conviction, and because he wasn't read his Miranda rights. And it's just so fascinating because it became that thing of like,
Let's be honest, he was
know?
probably guilty.
yeah, I don't remember what the deal was.
Well, if they're going to argue to the Supreme Court that he should have kept his mouth shut,
Well, and it was
let's just follow it down the line that he probably should have kept his mouth shut, should have been able to. And the police didn't warn him of that. But
it was also a really serious crime that he committed. And so I think some of it too was like, when you commit a crime like that, you're going to spend 20 to 30 years in prison. He's looking at ways that potentially he doesn't have to serve it.
Try to get out of it. Now, but do I believe that it's important for people to not have to speak to the police? And I'm talking in your everyday life, in your, if a police officer is on a manhunt in your neighborhood and they come to your door, should you be able to say, look, I don't know anything?
Right.
Or should you be able to not say anything at all?
Right.
Should that be a right that you have? Or should the police, have to force you into their investigation.
Well, and that's just the interesting thing about it all is like you hear a lot of the times when police are like you see it on television or in documentaries and they're like, if you have nothing to hide, just tell us. And it's like, these are not your friends. You know
No,
what
they
I
are
mean?
not.
They are not your friends. They're there for a mission. Like you need to understand that. And I think that's sometimes a very hard thing for people to grapple with.
It is. And the Fifth Amendment gives people the ability to deal with that. You know, the Fourth Amendment, the ability to keep safe in your possession. The Third Amendment, the ability to not have soldiers live in your house. That is so.
I didn't realize how big of a problem that was until I started reading old
You-
biographies
Yep.
and memoirs of the time because like that would like some of our former presidents were like Andrew Jackson, which you can have your thoughts about him, but it was funny because his mom hated the British, like
Mhm.
outright hated them. She passed that hatred on to her kids. And like some of it was of, just some of the things where the British could show up at your house and be like, I live here now. Bye.
Well, not just that, but that's where warrants come in.
Right.
The Fourth
And-
Amendment comes in because of that, because you would have in some British battalions, privates could write writs of sedition,
Mhm.
and that was their warrant to take your stuff,
Right.
to search your home. So
Take your food. Like that was the biggest
not
one.
just take your food, but let's say they wanted to read your journal
Right.
or look at your financial paperwork for your business.
Right. And try to figure out if you were against them or not. And that's just the
Or
crazy
if they
thing.
just wanted, if they should look in to see if they wanted more taxes from you.
Right.
So they would do things like that. And so that's part of why. Now, from what I understand, it wasn't the same universally. It was just certain, it was kind of a commander, what level, but they could do that. And a private could go to his sergeant and say, hey, look, run this up the chain. I saw a journal in it. Now, privates generally wouldn't stay in it, but, officer level, but, things like that could happen. So I understand why it was important to them.
Right. I wish like we have minutes from the times of them like writing this stuff, but I've read some of them and it's just so fascinating. Just some of the thoughts that were going on at the time of like why we're doing this, and who disagreed, who were the players. I don't know. I like really early on history though.
Yes. And how wild was it that it was the very first known experimentation of government by the smallest denominator?
Right. Well, the idea of a constitution was just kind of a new idea.
Yeah, it was.
It-
Well, yeah.
Because like that's the other part of it too is like they're looking at this going like, hey, we got to do better than kings, and I think
Mhm.
very easily could have become
well-
a king.
The other argument is we've got to do better than democracies.
Right.
And a lot of people don't understand democracy was not a good thing to them back then, because democracy turned into mobs.
Mhm.
And eventually mobs point at someone and say, we want everything they have,
Right.
and take it. And that's the death of meritocracy. And that's sadly kind of what's being passed down to our youth through our education system right now.
Right.
But back to the murder. So this guy, they are charging him with state second degree murder.
The guy from the 50-51
Yes.
or no, the other guy,
Yeah.
the one
the-
from the Minnesota.
The Minnesota murder. So I looked into this. I was like, I would think he should get first degree, just straight up capital punishment.
And typically if they don't charge him firstly with first degree, they're not going to, which is very
Yes.
interesting. Because
So either they're chased away from that because they don't think they can get it, or
I would think that this has gone to, in my thought process, this would have gone to it would be a felony. So it would likely would have had a jury. So maybe the jury didn't feel like it was high enough for first degree.
Yeah, or they're well. Who could it have gone through a grand jury to decide, or it could be that
It should go through a grand jury to decide, because that's typically how felonies work in this country, unless Minnesota's different.
yeah, and he could be considered maybe crazy enough that they don't want to push it up to that high of a bar. I think this guy's probably going to be looked at like a nut job. So, what second degree state murder involves is killing without premeditation, causing the death of a human being with the intent to affect or causing the death of a human being with the intent to affect the death of that person or another, but without premeditation. So it's like drive-by shootings. If you kill someone in a drive-by shooting, it sounds like they go for this because it's argued that maybe you weren't shooting at the person you killed.
So second degree can be a couple of different things. You know what I mean?
I'm just reading off what the Minnesota levels are. He could get no more than 40 years in prison.
Looking up the statute because I'm very interested, because so it looks like it's split between intentional and unintentional in Minnesota.
And honestly, I would argue he was premeditated.
I would say it was an intentional.
I mean, he drove to an individual's house.
Right. The thing I struggle with without premeditation, intentional murder constitutes the intentional murder of a person without premeditation. But I think if you have a list of 70 folks,
and you drove to their house, you went to their residence, you walked up to their house in a freaking mask with a cop uniform on, knocked on the door, drew him to the front door, dressed because you were dressed like a cop. I would say all of that, everything along that line. You know what? Maybe he didn't buy the gun or the bullets with the premeditation to do that. That might have been stuff that was just on his shelf. But everything else he did premeditated. But I think they're willing and dealing, and they're knocking that down to there so that he doesn't try to do the I'm a loony case.
Maybe because with first degree in the state of Minnesota, if it's premeditated, but maybe they can't claim, maybe because he's so sporadic in mental thought, they can't say with certainty it was premeditated, which I could see that.
Well, I'm afraid that if they had to argue that, the loony would come out and he might get off on the loony. But if they just go for this, ta-da.
Right. And I think
obvious Tim Walz made him do it.
Sure. Probably not. But yeah, I think that's why.
When people say that, I'm like, come on. I mean, Tim Walz is a boob and he embellishes a little bit, but he's not. I mean, he's smarter than I am. That's easy to say.
Oh, he's very bright. That's
I am, and I'm not that retarded that I would go to the closest semi-Republican guy to me and pull him to me and say, I need you to do this for me.
Right. It'd be like you asking Holly to do this for her.
Seriously.
And everyone's gonna be like, no one saw that coming.
Who would have known? Or maybe not even Holly. Maybe it's a person that's once removed.
Right.
But someone that's in a council that I, if not personally deal with, I deal with in some kind of form or fashion.
Well,
seriously.
Yeah. This guy is maximum sentence for first degree or second degree is 40 years.
Yep, 40 years.
But the recommended guidelines says 2.5 or 12 and a half years for first time offenders. I think he's going to get potentially that because he is a first time offender, but
I hope he gets more than that. He went and killed a lady and her husband. I hope he gets 40 for each of them, which is
Yeah,
how they should charge it. You know what? I'll tell you what, don't give him 40 for each of them. How old is this guy? He's like in his 50s now.
Yeah, he's an older gentleman.
Let's give him 20 for each of them. If he lives past 90, we'll let him out
yeah.
on probation.
Yeah, he was born in 67.
Oh, so okay. So he's in his 60s.
Yeah.
All right. 18 for each of them.
Yeah, the whole thing's just so interesting because like my grandfather was in prison for 23 years.
Yep, you've told me that story.
Yeah, and like
For murder, wasn't it?
it was a murder as well. And the hard thing is, granted, he didn't kill like some famous people, but what's interesting about this is because of his age. The hard thing that I found personally through the prison system is when you have these really old inmates, the prison then are responsible for taking care of them. And like, it's a nightmare, you know?
True. But also, if they were on the outside, the state would more than likely have to take care of them there also.
Fair.
Because it's not like, you know, I mean, we could put a retirement age on prisons. Once you reach 80 years old, we let you out because you're no longer, you know, or give them a test that when you're no longer able to commit that crime,
Right.
you know, we're going to let you out. But
it's harder to do with murder because of guns. That's not how he killed someone, but
that's true. But even then, I mean, an 80-year-old with a gun, I mean.
Truthfully, though, I think if my grandfather, he's 84 now, I think if he held a gun and it fired, I think the kickback would break his arm.
Well, there's that. And also, like, I mean, but maybe make it a test, like how well do they move and do they still have vision? But, you know, we could say, but even then, they would be still a burden on the state when you took them away from Social Security system, paying into it for so long, or a 401k or some kind of retirement system.
Well, it sits there. They don't tap into it unless there's like some expense that the prison won't pay for. You know what I mean?
Well,
like, and that was that's been one of the more eye-opening things for myself was like my grandfather came out of prison and his 401k had just been building, and like the Social Security that he paid into before he went away, he was older when he was arrested. You know, but like, how are you okay with that? You know what I mean?
The Social Security system's a Ponzi scheme anyway. I mean,
I've heard that plenty.
Well, it is by definition.
Well, and it's crazy.
Like none of the money I pay in, if I get to see Social Security, none of the money I pay in will be turned back. I'll be getting money from the next group of people that pay in.
Well, and that's the crazy thing is like I was trying to explain to some relatives of mine because they didn't understand Social Security very much, and I was like, it's not like there's an account sitting there where it's like Katie has paid X and Katie is going to get X. And that I think is really hard for people to understand is like, that's not how it's set up.
No, but they can't. You can't have a system like that where when it stops is when someone dies.
Right.
And then have them like, I mean, unless you get that crystal ball, like you had the other Friday night before the 50-51 protest, you know, like they're going to have to know when you're going to die. And then they could say, you're going to pay this much a week forever, but they've got to know when you're going to die, if you're going to have health effects en route, if you're going to be retiring early and everything like that.
Yeah. My dad really was under the belief that he wouldn't have Social Security at all available to him. You know what I mean? And that was just a firm belief. And so when he retired early, you know, we were fortunate enough he could retire early because of the financial decisions he made in his life. But a lot of people don't have that. And so then you have young people ended up taking care of the bill for their parents, to help them retire, and it's really hard, or pay for medical stuff.
But that's how it worked through all of history.
Right. Well,
Was
yeah.
you raised your kids right, so they stuck around.
Right. And they'll move you into the house.
And you made investments so that your kids got passed down a little bit of wealth, so that that was kind of your capability. So that little bit of wealth allowed them to maybe blossom into the world a little more. And most people didn't. Most people really didn't.
No,
But,
I don't.
And life is tragic like that. I mean, look, if we weigh your life and my life against each other, I would choose my life a million times because I didn't have to get breast cancer in my 20s.
Yeah. Yeah. See, and I think some of it's just like a cultural thing, because I think in the States, like, to explain to my husband when we went back home and explain, like, a lot of my cousins who are my age or older, younger, they're all adults. A lot of them still live at home. And my husband was like, they need to move out. Like, what are they doing? And I was like, that's just our culture. Like, because my sister lives with my parents, has forever. And it's nice because she's around to help them do stuff or watch the dogs. You know what I mean? And it's a cultural difference where my husband's culture is like, you're an adult, you're 18. Why aren't you outside, having your own place? But we would value it differently.
It's cultural, but it's not just, it's familial difference.
Yeah.
There's so many things that go into it. Different religions practice differently.
Oh yeah.
Different. There's studies on it, on these different cultures, whether they run in tribes or nuclear families are more important. How close you are to cities, that makes a difference. There's so many, so you can't one fits all of this. I mean, it's not even just cultural, because I come from a very close-knit family where none of us live at home with the parents, but we all live close.
Right.
And we're all like right there, and we're all, making plans for that inevitable time when they can no longer manage themselves. And it's fluid, and it moves between different siblings and different situations. And so it's all different, where, my grandfather, fighting cancer, his youngest son, he raised his youngest son to stay at home and to take over that caretaker role for his wife when he passed, and to manage the affairs that he set in motion. And that's things that he did. So every situation's different, and your sister, and there's also the complication that sometimes, we're going to see a lot more children stay home into their later years because our economy is dog shit.
Well, how do you afford a house? Like, that's
seriously, how do you afford an apartment? How do you afford a hostel?
Right. Because I've been apartment searching, as you know, and it's just like, I'm like, my husband and I do very well for ourselves. But like, I remember talking to my cousin. She's a corrections officer in Ohio. And I told her how much my rent was. And she's like, I don't make that in a month.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? And she was like, what is the average rent in Utah? And I pulled it up and I showed her, and she's like, I don't make anywhere near enough to cover something like this, and that was very eye-opening. But I agree with you. I think that's getting worse and worse all over the country.
And it depends on where you live. And Utah's probably going to be on the rebound. Texas is on the rebound. But then there's places like most of your rent-controlled Democrat cities.
Yeah. Well, and some of it too is just like, but I think a lot of people, like where I grow up, it's very rural. You know what I mean? For the most part, some parts of it. We have Youngstown, which is a pretty populated city. But to get an apartment in Youngstown can be quite cheap. You have to commit to the potential bullet holes and the drive-bys. But
that's
it's
the thing.
cheap.
Apartments are a good barometer for what your economy can sustain.
Yeah.
Apartments don't care about how many young people want an apartment. Apartments care whether they can get a body in there.
Right.
And so in Utah, apartments are the price they are because the economy can sustain that, because our lack of water. Granted, we're not overly regulated, but our lack of water, and there are still some regulations that restrict building of new houses or apartments. So
Right.
apartments can be higher priced because we don't have the water to support it. And we've got a large influx of people fleeing Democrat-run states right now.
Yeah.
And that's
well, and
that's exactly
at-
the reason.
I look at Utah. I don't see it as like a people are coming here to like who are from Democratic cities. What I think the thing that brings people here to Utah is cheap education, because that's why I came, and
Okay.
the jobs here are incredible.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like like my mom tells me, because like I flying, moving back east all the time, and my mom's like, "Why would you do that?" Like Utah is like has one of the best job markets in the country.
And why is that?
I think the fact that we brought in tech companies and told them they didn't have to pay taxes was a huge
True.
help.
Yep.
You know what I mean? To
We
raise that tax
lowered.
rate for them.
We have one of the easier bars for starting a business.
hmm
Same with Texas. Easy bar to start a business. We're not overly regulated. And so businesses are running away from these Democrat places, which seem to think, and no offense, but other Democrats, not yourself, think that businessmen and success is evil. And we must punish them for being successful.
Yeah, and I don't believe that, because you look at like Utah's business space. Majority of businesses in Utah are small businesses. And how are you going, like, these aren't like the person who owns the landscaping company down from you is not the Walmart family. You know what I mean? And
Yeah,
like
they're in
that's
Arkansas.
right. And you have to like separate that, you know, that mentality a wee bit. And I think that's
And
very
even
hard
if
for
that
people
guy
to do.
becomes successful and buys himself a Maserati
Right.
and
Godspeed, let him be, you know, buys
but
a
he
distracted
earned that.
life.
His meritocracy took him there. He had the idea and the opportunity and the chance. There's a guy from here in Tooele who has made a successful life for himself and has the big house and all those things. And people could look at him and say, "Oh, you're lucky," but he wasn't. He was a guy whose father died when he was a child. He was a guy who earned every bit of success he has. And I am happy that he's doing great.
Well, it becomes that like $1 million question of, am I lucky or did I work for it? And I remember my dad and my grandmother getting the massive fight over this, because my grandmother's very religious, and she was like, well, you know, God has given you
Oh, Providence.
this. Yeah. And it's like, you've got luck, like God has given you this, and you've been very lucky and blessed to have the life that you've had. And my dad was like, God had nothing to do with this. Neither did luck. He was like, where was God at the 16 hours that I had to work repeatedly? You know what I mean? To get to where I'm at today. And that, I remember that whole argument. It was a Sunday morning.
Yeah, it's part 100%. Your dad earned every bit of it. Were there lucky breaks along the way?
For sure.
Opportunities, turns in the road that he took when he could have went straight. Sure. Yep. Luck plays its role, but your dad was there for every bit of that.
Right.
So your dad earned every bit of his success. And so I think the Democrat Party, two things the Democrat Party needs to leave behind. Three things. Villainizing meritocracy, hating white men, and demonizing guns. And I think if the Democrat Party leaves those behind, they will move into this 22nd century very successful.
Yeah, and I don't even think those are hard to ask. That's what's crazy.
They're not, but the Democrats have hitched themselves to some pretty wild wagons lately.
You're not wrong.
I mean,
you're not wrong.
You know, they have, and the Republicans hitched themselves, but we're on the pendulum swing.
Right.
So the Democrats are going to change. We're going to see a Democrat party in 10 years. It's going to be a big tent party again. Well, I think the pendulum swings have gotten faster and more dramatic. So it might even be 5 years or 6.
I would agree that it's definitely gotten more dramatic. I don't know about faster, but we'll definitely see.
Well, this pendulum swing happened pretty quick.
Yeah.
But then again, maybe not when you look at it, because the previous pendulum swing, when it swung to the left, kicked off in the early 2000s. And prior to that, it kicked off in the early 80s. So I don't know. Maybe we are right on time. It's every 20 years.
Yeah, which would make sense. Yeah, that you would hit that.
So, I mean, we're right on time. Maybe it just feels faster because I'm older and I've lived through 2 of them.
Yeah.
Well, I've lived consciously through 2 of them. I've lived through 3, but consciously I've been through 2 of them. I've witnessed them. That's why it's interesting being this independent guy. I've been able to sit back and go, oh, I've seen this party just from the other side. Like right now, the Republicans are absorbing the castaways from the Democrat Party.
And that's so funny you say that, because like we're seeing it in the Dems too. And like it's wild just to how many people are leaving the Republican Party and coming to the Democrat side. Like this year, this cycle, like for municipals. So last municipal election in Utah County, I had 6 Democrats running for the whole county. This year I have 9.
Well, what I mean by castaways is RFK and and Tulsi Gabbard, where they didn't necessarily change their message. Tulsi Gabbard got run out because of anti-war.
Yeah, Tulsi I think was Republican, just like for some reason just felt, and I would love to know like what about the Democratic message made her hold on for as long as she did.
Well, she was anti-war, and it was during the Syria conflict when Obama was trying to get his presidential name out there and start a new war, because presidents like to do that, both Republican and Democrat. I don't know if you know that, but Tulsi, as the number 2 in the Democrat Party, was one of the voices that said no. And then when she went over as a I believe at the time a major in the National Guard, went over as a congresswoman, but also a major in the National Guard, went over and sat down with Assad to try to say, what can we do to avert war? And the Democrats called her a traitor and a puppet. And that's when she started to leave. Yeah. I think she was an anti-war Democrat. Like the Democrat Party right now we're seeing has anti-war people in it. But those people got real quiet during Obama's time, just like anti-war Republicans. Half of them got real quiet.
Yeah.
A week and a half ago.
It's definitely very interesting, but I would love like for her, because RFK Jr., I think he's a Republican. Like he's always been a Republican. He just
what?
I do.
In what status was he always a Republican?
I think the biggest thing with RFK, in my viewpoint, and I'd have to pull up his policies and like what he's gone off for, but I think the biggest thing is like, I think when you come from a family like a Kennedy's, I think you're told we're all going to be this. You know what I mean? What policy of his was ever Republican? The Republicans were the pro-vax party until COVID. Remember the anti-vax movement that actress was in? All Democrats. Right.
All the hippies were all Democrats. Why are the hippies now Republican? We're changing. It's that pendulum swing rewrites everything. And it will rewrite it again. It'll just be different actors on the screen.
Oh, he supported the Green New Deal. I had to look it up.
Told you.
Yeah,
he's always been a Democrat.
Yeah, that whole family's just wild.
Well, of course they are.
Yeah, but I need to go.
Yes, so do I. I've got to wake up at 3 a.m.
Ugh, Godspeed to you. But thank
Yeah.
you for having me. I really appreciate
Hey,
it.
dude, I dig these talks. I dig this across the aisle talk when I can smack talk Democrats to a Democrat and I can smack talk Republicans to a Democrat.
It's easy time for me.
I spend a lot of time with Republicans in my life. I really do, because I'm out here in the rural part of Utah. I mean, like there's Republicans and then there's where I am, and they make Republicans look like liberals. Like when I get around inner city Republicans, I'm like, geez.
Yeah, it's a different animal. And
Yeah.
it's always very interesting because you had Carrie on last time and I was here. And she said something about like how some of the Republicans weren't like real Republicans, and they went back on like some of the things. And I talked to my husband about it because he used to work in the Ledge. He worked for the tourism and something committee, and he was like, you don't understand. Like, he's like, in the Republican Party, that is their fighting. It's like, who is more Republican? And
Well, it's like, well, Democrats are the same way. You know,
Oh, yeah.
the biggest one is years ago, I dated a goth girl, and she put it best when goths would go, I'm gother than thou, you know, because they've got to be weird.
Yeah, that's true.
And so every time you pick an ideology, libertarians do the same thing.
Yes. Well,
Right?
I think it becomes a person's personality, and you're just like, I don't need this to be like being a Democrat, and politics does not need to be my personality. Like, I like books. You know what I mean? I read a lot. I'm real big into history.
Yeah. Well, lean into the cancer fight thing. If
Yeah,
you
I
want to build a personality, that right there is a personality. I'm going to lean into the gun thing. You lean into the fighting cancer thing.
Yeah.
Those
It
are
works.
personalities I can get behind.
Right. I tell everyone that I'm
Yeah.
Italian, and so because I'm one of those people and have an Italian passport. But you know,
Yeah. I'm
It's life.
Italian. I'm Italian. I'm a Guido. I'm, you know,
yeah, I love being an Italian license plate things for my car. My husband won't put them on. So
really.
no, he said they're
I'm
ugly.
secretly high-fiving him. Is he there listening right now?
Yeah, he is.
So, he's an un-American woman. I'm not putting that crap on my car.
No, he can get like 4 citizenships, and he's like, I'm good just as American.
That's right.
So
That's right. He can get what citizenship?
Philippines, Israel, Italy, and he has his American. So yeah, those are the 4.
I like where he's at. Stick with American.
Yeah,
Only the best.
That's how my husband thinks.
All right, Katie, have a
Thank you.
wonderful night. Tell your
You
husband
too.
thank you for letting me steal you away for
Not
a
a-
couple hours. Everybody, Katie Adams Anderton, go check her out on Facebook. Go to my Facebook page or the comments here and jump on there. Let's support fighting cancer. That is an evil that everyone, we need to let's have a win, right?
Yeah.
If we beat cancer, everyone wins, except for the pharmaceutical companies. Let's beat the pharmaceutical companies once and for all and beat cancer.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. Have a great night.
Thank you. Have a good night. Bye-bye.